We all make mistakes. It's only natural. And that's the way we learn. Let's learn before we make the mistake. So I'm here to tell you what not to do in your fantasy baseball drafts. If you can't wait for draft season, guess what? You don't have to. Join Underdog Fantasy and you can draft right now for MLB Best Ball for the 2024 season. They've got some new contests that just opened up. Check them out right now. If you sign up and use promo code Endgame, you get a 100% deposit match for your first $100 that you put into your account. Try Underdog Fantasy today. This year, I want to start off with this piece of advice. Don't wait too long to grab your ace. Just a few years ago, I would have said, I'm going to avoid starting pitching early. It's just way too risky. Get a nice hitter who can help you in multiple categories, kind of give you that floor. Pitchers are so volatile. And that is true, right? Injuries definitely happen a lot to aces. But I want to secure at least one guy relatively early, and I'm talking the first 4 rounds, because it's just so hard to find somebody who can rack up strikeouts, wins, and innings if you wait too long. Looking at current ADP, well, if you wait until after round 4 to start grabbing a pitcher, if you're lucky, maybe you get a guy like the Phillies, Aaron Nola. His ADP is 48 as of right now, but probably not. So then you're left picking from the best of this bunch. A guy like Tariq Skubal. Great talent, immense upside. A lot of people feel like he's a dark horse Cy Young candidate. But what about the health? Is he going to hold up for a whole season? And is he really going to be as good as we expect? Tyler Glasnow, who seems to be made of glass, great talent, could be a number 1 pitcher, but again, major question marks there. Blake Snell still doesn't have a team. Max Fried also had some injuries. Nice floor, but not the highest ceiling. Same goes for Logan Webb, more of an innings eater, solid, but is he really an ace? And as much as I love Grayson Rodriguez, another young pitcher like Logan Gilbert, George Kirby, again, I prefer them as a SP2 more than an SP1. It's hard to project wins, I get that, but not so hard to project strikeouts. You guys will be out there every 5 days who will be effective and who can punch batters out on the regular. Last year, there were only 17 pitchers who amassed 200 strikeouts or more. Of that group, you had a couple guys like Dylan Cease, Mitch Keller, and Lucas Giolito who could get you strikeouts but also wreck your ratios. So outside of your top 12 pitchers, and again, assuming you're in a 12-team league typically in a snake draft, once you get past those top 12 pitchers, you're looking at those pitchers I already talked about who all have some degree of risk. I would rather just be secure and get one of those studs early-ish. And I don't mean you have to pick somebody round 1 or even round 2. Nothing wrong with getting Strider or Cole. But again, I'm fine with somebody like a Luis Castillo or Zach Gallen. Just gives me some peace of mind. Now on the offensive side, the next thing I don't want you to do is to wait too long on steals. Now that might sound counterintuitive. I've talked about this a lot, especially if you saw my video talking about the rule changes and how everything changed for fantasy baseball last year. In 2023, that we had the bigger bases, the pitch clock. Pitchers couldn't throw over more than twice, and so runners were able to run wild. It happened more so than even anybody expected. There were more stolen bases last year in the majors than any season since 1987. So when we see steals basically doubling overnight in the majors, there should be steals everywhere. Why do I have to worry about it, especially early in a draft? You would think you could just forget about it and wait. Maybe pick up some guys off the waivers, get some cheap steals that way. But it's not as easy as you may think. In fact, the stolen base leaderboard was a lot more top-heavy than people realize. Sure, there were 51 different players who stole over 20 bags, but when you lift the threshold to 30, there's only 14 batters who stole more than 30 bases. And out of that group, you have a couple of players who aren't even going to be starting this year. They just kind of lucked into some playing time last year. So again, you have this elite group of 12 players who are going to be early round picks who are getting the majority of the steals. So if you aren't one of the managers in your fantasy league who's getting one of these studs, who's getting you 30, 40, 50 steals, think of a Corbin Carroll, Julio Rodriguez, Ronald Acuna type in the first round. Look, that's fine. You don't have to take one of those guys in the first round, but this is also why I say I'm not taking somebody like Aaron Judge, who sure could mash a ton of home runs, but he's not helping you in steals. And don't point me to that one season where he happened to get some steals, because every other season he's getting you like 6. I want somebody who can at least get me 20 steals, if not 30 or more, early on. And if I don't get one of those players in the first or second round, I'm not waiting and I'm not punting. And for those who don't know, punting, you're basically saying, forget this category, I'm going to focus in on all the other categories, and I'm not just going to worry about that one. It's so hard to really pull that off because if I say I'm just not even going to worry about stolen bases, I'm going to dominate in home runs and RBIs and runs and average. You really have to make sure that that roster is dominant in all those other categories because you're basically giving up in one category. Now here's something I always advise not to do, no matter the round, the position, the league. Don't pay for last year's stats. When a player has a career year, you need to think to yourself, it's called a career year for a reason. That means it's probably not getting better. Sure, when you have a very young player, like a Gunnar Henderson, there's absolutely room for improvement, especially when you start out slow. But when you talk about a player who's been around a few years, somebody who suddenly has an outburst of offensive output in any category, whatever the reason, you have to kind of wonder, is there going to be a regression? And the answer is yes, there probably is going to be regression. Matt Olson is probably not going to hit 54 home runs again this year. He could definitely be among the league leaders, and sure, he's worth an early pick, but I'm not taking him in the top 15 because of last year. I don't think Josh Lowe, even though he's a pretty young player, he's not going to steal 32 bases, and he's probably not going to hit anywhere near 300 again. The reason? Simple. He overachieved on his expected batting average, and he stole way more than expected. Same thing with Nolan Jones, that insanely high batting average on balls in play. He's not hitting 297 this year. And he was great all year, and especially in the postseason, but I don't even think Corey Seager makes it through the season healthy. Oh, wait, well, too late for that one. The point is, you always have to look forward, not backward. And the biggest mistake you can make, the simplest one to avoid really, is not to know your league. Know the settings, know the scoring rules, know the roster makeup, know everything about it. It's easy. Everything's online now. You click on the rules and you read them. If you only play in one league and you played in that same league type for years, sure, maybe you already got that down. But you have to be aware that not all leagues are the same. And especially if you're like me and you play in multiple leagues and all different types of leagues, you have to be aware there's roto, there's points, there's head-to-head, there's weekly, there's daily lineups, there's best ball. There's so many different ways you can play fantasy baseball. You have to know the particulars of your league. If you happen to play in a points league, guys who take walks and accumulate hits but maybe aren't going to get a ton of home runs or steals, let's say somebody like Yandy Diaz. He's going to be more valuable in that format. Same thing with Alex Bregman, who now is, getting you maybe like 20-ish home runs, not stealing any bases, but he walks a ton, he drives and runs, he's out there all the time. He's going to accumulate a lot more points. In a points league, definitely more valuable. And then there's someone like Esteury Ruiz, who just because of his steals is going to be valuable in roto, but really not that much so in points. And then the roster makeup definitely affects the way you are going to draft. Check to see, do you need to have 2 starting pitchers, 4 starting pitchers in your starting lineup, 2 relievers, no relievers? Does it even matter? Is it a 2-catcher league, a 1-catcher league? You've got to check ahead of time and have a plan going into draft day. I know it sounds like work, but that's what makes fantasy baseball fun because it's so detailed and the preparation really pays off when you execute your plan. And of course, the biggest mistake that you want to avoid is to not subscribe to the Fantasy Endgame. I've got you covered with draft advice all preseason long, and of course, with waiver wires and panic videos and trade suggestions throughout the regular season. So keep it locked here, get the notifications bell on, and check out this playlist with all the latest draft advice.